Welcome to the RiverWatch Macroinvertebrate refresher video on mollusks. This video will help you with your identifications of snails, clams, and mussels for the Illinois RiverWatch program. So for RiverWatch, we use 37 different macroinvertebrates as water quality indicators. They are all in the worms, crustaceans, insects, or mollusk category. For this presentation, we will be in the mollusks: snails, mussels, and clams. So for that category, here's some of the pictures you might be familiar with. These generally have a hardened shell with a soft body inside. Our first RiverWatch indicator is the left-handed snail. This is what they look like in a petri dish. Their body is pretty thin, you can almost see through it, very pale colored. A left-handed snail, when you point the spire up, has the opening on the left side. That's how it gets its name. These are very very helpful indicator of water quality because these are also called lunged snails. They can gulp air and don't have to get their dissolved oxygen from the water, meaning they can tolerate a lot more organic pollution. So these are very tolerant of pollution. If you have a lot of these at your site, you could have poor water quality. Next we have the right-handed snail. This is what they look like in the petri dish. Usually a little darker colored, not as easy to see through. The shell opens to the right with the spire pointing up. Next we have a perculate snails. This is another kind of right-handed snail. This is what they look like in the petri dish. They have an operculum over it, a hard covering that they can suck back into their shell and close off the opening to protect themselves or seal oxygen inside or whatever they're doing. So that's what that looks like under 30 times magnification. So there's two kinds of right-handed snails. One's just the right-handed without the operculum, and then the other one is the operculate snail. So he's right-handed with the protective covering. Next we have the planorbid snail. Many of you have probably seen these before. Some people call them ram's horn snails. There's a good many terrestrial kinds, but there's an aquatic kind too that we will, in the family Planorbidae, that we use for RiverWatch water quality indication. This is what they look like under 10 times magnification. Kind of a flattened shell, spirals in on itself. The spire doesn't point up like it did on the left and right-handed snails. It kind of flat and spirals in on itself. Next we have the limpet. This is the limpet snail. So this is what they look like in the petri dish. They're very small. They're kind of like a half mussel shell or clam shell. Then underneath they have a soft body. That's called the foot. So it's like a shallow cone is the best way to describe it. So half a shell and then a foot, a soft body underneath. We don't get a lot of these in RiverWatch. Part of it could be because they're really small and hard to see, but keep an eye out for these. These guys suck themselves to hard objects. Next we have the Chinese mystery snail. This is a special interest species, so it does not actually count towards our stream quality index. We do, however, note its presence or absence because it is an invasive species that's becoming more prolific around the Chicago area and northern Illinois area. So the best way to identify these is it is a right-handed snail. It's usually much larger than native snails. The width is approximately equal to its height, so it's like a box shape. Native snails are usually taller than they are wide. Next we have the Asian clam, another special interest species, an invasive clam from Asia. These are very common in Illinois, not so much in northern Illinois, but middle and southern Illinois. You've probably seen these. This is what they look like in the petri dish. If you zoom in a little bit, you see they can be yellowish, brown to black in color. They have a rounded shell with evenly spaced, elevated, concentric growth rings. So these rings are very symmetrical and raised up off their shell, so very obvious characteristic as the Asian clam. Next we have the fingernail clam, another special interest species. This is actually a native species, so we want to have these at our sites. This is what they look like in a petri dish. Very smooth, almost the color pale like your fingernail. Another reason they're called fingernail clams is because they don't grow much bigger than a fingernail. This is about as big as they get. They're cream colored with smooth growth rings, so they do have growth rings, but they're very smooth. Nothing like the raised growth rings of the Asian clam. Next we have the zebra mussel. This is another special interest species. Remember that special interest species do not count towards your RiverWatch water quality index. You only circle yes or no for them on your biological survey sheet. Remember to spend a little bit extra time just looking around at your site to try to find special interest species. The zebra mussel is a very prolific invasive species from Europe. They are known for biofouling, where they cling to hard structures like intake pipes and effluent pipes and boats and stuff, and just kind of multiply on there, kind of like barnacles. This is what they look like in the petri dish. They look like their name sounds. They have the black and white striping going on, a triangular shaped shell, so that's also pretty unique and a dead giveaway for it's a zebra mussel. Next we have the freshwater mussel. This is also a special interest species, so you could mark yes or no on your biological survey sheet. They are usually larger than any of the other invasive mussels or clams. They come in many shapes. They have two calcareous shells hinged together in the middle. The shells are variable in color, shape, and size depending on the species. So a lot of them are kind of this oval shape. Some of them are smooth like this, but you can kind of see a ridge on it, or they'll have bumps on it. So they can come in various shapes and sizes. These used to be a lot more common, but they've been overhunted in the last century to make buttons, and then they're also just suffering from poor water quality. So if you do have these at your site, that is a good thing. So now let's test your knowledge. See if you can identify everything in this picture. See if you can identify the left-handed, right-handed, Perkulam, planorbid, Chinese mystery snails, and try to identify the limpet, Asian and fingernail clams, zebra, and freshwater mussels. So freshwater mussel got cut off, but just try to identify that in this picture. And then you can get a piece of paper and write it down, or you can do it in your head, and then go ahead and pause it while you're doing that. And then when you're ready, unpause it, and I'll go to the next slide to show the answers. So here are the answers. A is the zebra mussel. You can see the triangular shaped shell with the black and white striping right up here. B is the limpet. That's really hard to see from this perspective, but you kind of take into account the really small body size, and that'll put you on the right track. C is the fingernail clam, pale like your fingernail, about the same size too. D is the Asian clam, so the dark colored with the growth rings around it, very symmetrical. E is the freshwater mussel, a lot larger, irregular shaped bumps or ridges usually. Planorbid snail is F, so the ram's horn snail, you can see it spiraling in on itself right here. G is the Chinese mystery snail. This is a smaller Chinese mystery snail I had, kind of a box shape, so very wide. A Perkulam snail, you can't really tell these apart too much from this perspective, but a Perkulam snail has the covering right here, that's H. I is the right-handed snail, so no covering there. And J is the left-handed snail. So those are all the mollusks for the RiverWatch program. I hope this video was a help, and that next time you're out identifying mollusks, you'll remember some of this and be a little bit better equipped. Thanks for watching.